All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Show. Excited to be with you here. I am not going to spend too much time talking in introduction here because I got a great guest for you guys, which, by the way, I promise you, because some of you, and I still have the record here, ask, well, can you bring this guest back? And I said, I promise I will if he's available because he's a busy person. So, well, guess what? Mike Krupa is here. So you guys in for quite a treat because he's someone I trust, someone I value his judgment, and being a historian himself, someone who understands the depth of really what is going on, not only in Poland or Eastern Europe, but around the world when it comes down to the certainly the conflicts of the Ukraine and Russia. So welcome, Mike. Good to have you back.
Hey, it's great to be back on the show. Hello, everybody.
Very, very excited. So, you guys, I'm sure and I read the comments you guys posted last time about how much you enjoyed Mike. Well, here it is again. So, let's get into this because I don't like to waste too much of your time, Mike, because I
No, it's
your brain.
see, you might guess from my shirt. See, I've been busy in the last couple of days because of my shirt. I've been doing a double for Zelensky in New York, so now I'm back home and I have time to speak
Oh
to
my
you. So,
gosh.
yeah.
Oh, I greatly.
Yeah, I didn't get. Sorry, I couldn't get rid of the shirt, but
No
unfortunately for you, so
worries. No
part of the
worries.
job.
We greatly appreciate it. So, well, what I would like to start with, and I am sure our viewers will be very interested in learning more about the historical aspects of what just took place in Canada regarding the Canadian Parliament honoring a Nazi. Why am I bringing this up? Is because now I am reading also that now the Polish government is interested in extraditing him, Honka, his name, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
because of the crimes he committed in some villages in Poland back then. What's your take on all this, Mike?
Well, first of all, if we were to believe the statements that were made by Prime Minister Trudeau, he was suggesting, I think, in today's statement or yesterday's statement, that at the end of the day, this could be part of some Russian propaganda campaign. So we have to be careful because it was Putin who called up the former now Speaker of the Parliament, Anthony Rota, and said to him, "Well, I'd like you to place a 96-year-old Nazi up there in the stands, and you do it because that's what I want to do as Vladimir Putin." So it's pretty demeaning when the Prime Minister of Canada doesn't want to take responsibility for what he obviously approved. I mean, you don't enter the Canadian Parliament as if you were to enter a bar. I mean, you really get vetted from what I heard, upside down. So somebody knew, and I'm guessing a lot of people knew about this guy's history. But at the end of the day, I mean, notice one fact that when they were introducing this guy, and they said that, and this was repeated later in the news, that, he fought for Ukrainian independence during World War II, fighting the Russians. Well, stop right there. What factions and what countries were fighting the Russians in World War II? Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, and later Imperial Japan. So he doesn't seem to be on the side of the good guys in this. I mean, that should have opened up a couple of eyes and said, wait a minute, something ain't wrong here. I mean, there was no independent Ukraine in World War II. There were only entities and factions associated with the Ukrainian nationalist movement that claimed to be fighting for a greater Ukraine. So it's obviously, it sort of reminds you of that scene in Naked Gun. I think it was in part 3, and where Leslie Nielsen is speaking and everything behind him is blowing up. Well, that's kind of what I took away from Trudeau's so-called apology during his statement yesterday, where he apologized to the Jewish community, the Polish community, and he also apologized to something that I never heard before, because he called it the 2S LGBT plus something. I'm not up to date with these acronyms, so I had to ask people. I mean, I was used to the traditional LGBTQ, but now it's 2S LGBT something. I guess it was referencing to I don't know, all the trans people who were killed in the concentration camps. Wink, wink. But it's really demeaning, and the fact that he's not willing to take responsibility for this just shows, the character of the man. Everybody knew what this guy represents. Everybody knew the outrage that's going to come out of it. But at the end of the day, you don't take responsibility for it because you don't have any moral spine in you. And at the end of the day, anything justifies rabid Russophobia and fighting Russia, even if it means, commemorating and clapping for a guy who was a member of an organization that has committed many documented atrocities during World War II against Jews, Poles, and other innocent civilians.
Yeah. Well, there is no, you're absolutely correct, Mike. There is no way someone will be in a parliament without being vetted. And I am saying, well, wait a minute, where is the role of those assistants and all this? They're going to vet the guy before they bring him in onto the floor of the parliament.
Yeah.
I've always believed that the prime minister, dictator Trudeau, is doing nothing but to divert the attention from the domestic front, given where two things. And I was in Canada about a month ago or so, so I still have my contacts in Canada there. So the conversation was always about two things: food prices are going up, and housing crisis in Canada. So, and I'm thinking, okay, is dictator Trudeau's trying to divert attention, which most likely it is the case. But here's the thing now: will this gentleman Honka be extradited to Poland, given that the Polish government now has asked Canada to extradite the guy?
Well, just to be clear, the official request for extradition actually came from the Polish Minister of Education. His name is Czarnek. So he wrote a letter to, we have a special commission in Poland, a special institution called the Institute of National Memory. And they are charged with basically documenting and eventually investigating crimes from the times of World War II and the communist period against the Polish nation. They have special prosecutors who do this, and these guys can actually roll out requests to international organizations or other countries to extradite some war criminal to Poland. So what we saw was basically a letter written by the Minister of Education to the Institute to actually write a formal extradition request. Now, this generated a lot of headlines, obviously. However, I'm always being the sort of cynic here, whereas some people call it the well-informed optimist. We have elections coming up on October the 15th in Poland. So to tell you the truth, from my perspective, I see this as an election ploy, and I don't think this is going to go anywhere, sadly. And I'll give you the reason why. Well, the first major reason is because Poland has been Ukraine's loyal agent ever since the start of the special military operation. I mean, we've pumped billions into Ukraine. We've given them armaments. And if that wasn't enough, I think it was about last year, the presidential palace actually hosted members of the Azov battalion openly and publicly. So you're telling me now that all of a sudden you come out against banderism when all this time you've been basically playing the pro-banderist game. I mean, you had no idea what Azov represents. How could you not know? I mean, a few years back, there was an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act in the United States where they explicitly forbade monies going to the Azov battalion. Now, the United States Congress has obviously forgotten about that right now, but that amendment was there. Anybody could Google it and check out, the PDF section of the acts that come out of Congress. So sadly, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, not to mention the fact that I think it'll be a stretch for Canada to extradite, what is he, 96, 98-year-old guy to Poland. I mean, obviously there's no statute of limitations on murder, but I just don't see it happening. So what I'm seeing right now is the government, which has been very subservient to the regime in Kiev, literally from day to day has become very, I would say, Rand Polish on this issue. So no more money, no more military equipment. And oh, by the way, you're not going to send your grain through a country. So I'm going to pour a little bit cold water on this because I'm here on the ground and I know these people. I know what their modus operandi is. I wouldn't be surprised if after October the 15th, when Law and Justice most likely will win the elections, but they're going to have to do a lot of horse trading to get a majority in parliament. I think a lot of this stuff is going to be forgotten. As a matter of fact, last week there was an interview with one of Poland's mainstream newspapers, Rzeczpospolita, with one of the most important ministers and members of the ruling party, a guy named Jacek Sasin. And Sasin said that despite basically the current, turbulence in Polish-Ukrainian relations, we're on Ukraine's side. We're not ruling out sending more weapons in the future. It's just right now we have this, thought and relations. But he said we're on their side and it's in our interest to continue to fight Russia. So I read that as a signal from the government going to the, the elites, the globalists, the representatives in Warsaw and in other capitals that, this is just election, we're playing the election card right now. But after October 15th, it's probably going to be business as usual. I don't think anybody, if they were Viktor Orban, for February 24th acted like Viktor Orban in his spirit of no money, no weapons to Ukraine. We want a quick peace and end this as quickly as possible. You're not going to weaken or destroy Russia. Then I could take what the Minister of Education sent to the Institute of National Memory as something sincere. But I think this is just playing the tough guy card before the elections. Because as I said, where were you in the last 600 days? Yeah. I mean, you didn't see the pictures of Zaluzhny with Bandera pictures behind him. I mean, he should be extradited to Poland. You know what I mean? So, you know, if people are bought with these kind of antics, well, whatever. It's democracy, right? You can manipulate masses. But me personally, I'm not convinced that this is genuine. Although what it is genuine, I think, is, and your audience might have caught on this, but the Russian embassy in Ottawa has actually, I think they rolled out a statement where they say they are considering, formally asking for the extradition of Hunka to the Russian Federation. So, as I said, that's probably not going to happen. But I think, well, I'm pretty sure the Russians are more genuine in their request than the Polish side, unfortunately.
Yeah. And second thing, Michael, just to follow up quickly on this before I move on to the next part of the conversation here. Why the request is coming out of the education department rather than the foreign ministry?
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't that
the protocol?
That's it. I mean, this should be an extradition request that should be signed by at least 3 people. The Polish president should get behind it. The Polish prime minister should get behind it, and the minister of justice, and as you said, possibly the minister of foreign affairs. Now, if that had that much clout, I might say, oh, okay, they're putting so much political capital into this, But nobody knows who the hell the Polish minister of education is, right? So it's not going to make waves. I mean, I've seen it going on Twitter, people saying that, oh, Poland is formally requesting. Well, as I said, I'm just as a corrective, there is a request that came from the minister of education to the entity that can dole out such a request. But Poland formally, at least unless something happened in the last couple of hours, the state of Poland, the Republic of Poland, hasn't sent this formal extradition request yet. And I don't think it will send it because I think it's an election ploy.
Wow. Now, you are on the ground there, and you're someone I truly trust, and I mean it when I say this, Mike. I'm a former military. I don't sugarcoat things, and I don't say things just to sound nice, whatever. That's not my personality. You're on the ground. You will have a better understanding than anyone, at least I talk to, about this topic. Why is the president of Poland, Duda, is throwing or pushing the foreign minister, Mateusz, under the bus when he said, no. The foreign minister, when he stated that Poland's going to stop its military assistance, he did not mean it that way. Why all of a sudden the change when it was stated by the foreign minister that Poland is going to stop the assistance? They're still going to meet or honor their previous agreements. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're seeing the President Duda, stepping forward and throwing Mateusz under the bus. What is after that? Because right after it, Mike, the United States issued a $2 billion loan for Poland to purchase weapons.
Yeah.
What's the big picture in this?
I think the problem here is that they're playing to 2 different audiences, because right now, Morawiecki is the one who's holding rallies in Poland. He has to talk to the people, to the voters. So he's going to be using more hardline rhetoric, whether he believes it or not. I don't think he does, but he's going to be using more hardline rhetoric than the president. Now, the president, first of all, he doesn't have to run another election. I mean, he doesn't have to worry about another election. So right now he can do things that would seem to be more sincere. What I think Duda is doing right now is, because he's thinking of somehow anchoring himself in any Western institution. I mean, I don't think he's seriously thinking about becoming, for example, NATO secretary, but he might be thinking of, maybe the World Bank, maybe the European Union. So I think he's playing to a different audience, the audience that would want to see the proxy war with Russia to continue. So Duda seems to be more of the agent of that line of thinking. And let's not forget, in terms of, the optics, I mean, Duda is the one who's been running around and hugging Zelensky all the time. I mean, there are some suggestions coming around that they make a beautiful couple in Holland somewhere, or in the United States, if you know what I mean, a rainbow couple, so to say. But literally, I mean, it was just like, the amount of memes that this generated, it was just really hilarious. And right now, somebody made a meme after this whole falling out, Duda crying and say, oh my God, he left me for another one, for Germany. So, Morawiecki obviously did the same thing. He would visit He would visit Ukraine. He would visit Kiev. But even him, I mean, it wasn't that level of, hey, kumbaya, let's hug each other. I mean, Duda was really into it. I mean, he was the one who said last year on the 3rd of May celebrations on Constitution Day that, hey, by the way, let's imagine if there's no border between Poland and Ukraine. Wouldn't that be great? That came out of Duda's mouth. So a lot of people attribute, so whereas Morawiecki is a hawk, Duda was like a super hawk. So he was actually the one who was making the more outlandish statements. Now, some people up until recently were attributing this to the fact that apparently Duda's grandfather was Ukrainian himself and apparently was a member of UPA. Now, Duda apparently has denounced this. He says this is not true, that the names are different. There was a lot of other Dudas in the OUN Organization of Ukrainian Nationals, but it wasn't the Duda that is his grandfather, which doesn't change the fact that he really, I mean, he's been outdoing himself, at least until, the last 2 weeks when he went to the UN in his subservience to Ukraine. I mean, things that would have sounded outrageous a couple of years ago, like, liquidating the border between Poland and Ukraine, or he made a statement once where, the Russians should come to Ławra-Pieczerska, which is the great monastery in Kiev, which is right now being persecuted, by the way, by Zelensky. And the goal is to make them beg on their knees for Ukrainian forgiveness. I mean, this guy's living in La La Land. So, but at the end of the day, I think he's catering to a different audience. So he has to remain, the calm guy who's weathering the storms right now between Poland and Ukraine. But at the end of the day, he's going to sort of maintain the line that there can be no daylight between Kiev and Warsaw. And the most important thing is to fight Russia, obviously, to the last Ukrainian, and then maybe to the last Pole. But right now, we'll stick to the last Ukrainian.
Yeah. So could it be that, for example, the recent moves by the president of Poland, Duda, that he got spooked by what Zelensky said at the UN Assembly? And I recall, because I listened to the translated version, of course, of it, when he said, well, the next is that Russia's going to invade Poland.
Yeah.
I am bringing history here to compare this to exactly what the former president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, said exactly the same thing about Russia invading Finland and Sweden. So at that time, because we all know what happened in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So my thinking is, and this is just my thinking, and correct me, Mike, if I'm wrong here. Could it be that Poland gets spooked by this and rush into accepting the $2 billion loan from the US regarding armaments?
Well, from what I understand, and I hope I understand it correctly, the $2 billion that's going to go into our military the aim is to refurbish us for all the military equipment to replenish and replace what we've sent to Ukraine. So I'm hoping that's the case. With all the Apaches coming in, the F-35s, the Abrams tanks, there's going to be a lot of equipment pouring into Poland in the next couple of years. Whether that's good equipment, that's a different story, but there's a lot of it coming in, and most of it is obviously going to be manufactured in the United States. So the military industrial complex is going to be having a bonanza. But right now, thankfully, because we're still in the pre-election season, nobody is contemplating or speaking publicly about moving into Ukraine. As a matter of fact, the line of thinking is basically, the reason why we supported Ukraine is because no Poles were dying, and we still managed to kill a lot of Russians. So sort of what Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal are saying in the last couple of days. What that could change after October 15th, but it's not going to change from day to day, because all that equipment is going to take 4, 5, 6 years to come into Poland, to be integrated with the armed forces, to have the proper training, and so on. I hope nobody harbors long-term plans of making a stupid move into Belarus, for example. And I hope they have enough, of a survival instinct or a preservation instinct to not do something so rash. But as I said, with this government and the amount and the tentacles that the deep state, the military intelligence, especially the military intelligence complex, has in Poland and has had for the last 30 years, many things can happen. Like, for example, I recently came across this interesting opinion. I forgot who the author is, but it really struck me, where he wrote that, imagine if a Polish government were to be elected that says, like Viktor Orban, okay, we're totally disengaging ourselves from this, Ukrainian crusade. We're going to rebuild our relations with Russia. We're going to force the Ukrainians to the table. We're going to send a lot of these refugees back to Ukraine, and it's over. No more playing the pawn of the neocons' wet dreams in Eastern Europe. And this author said, if that were to happen, the amount of Polish generals, officers imbued with NATO thinking, Polish intelligence officers, or what we would call the Polish deep state, their numbers are so large that they can mount a successful coup in Poland and abolish that government. So we would have, a Maidan type of situation in Warsaw where, oh my God, we have a pro-Russian government in Warsaw, demonstrations, handing out of cookies again. And and then, possibly doing a Gaddafi on you with a bayonet up your, what. So it struck me that that the other side of all this, this is called the evil empire, the people who want to push that in that war, they're very influential. But I'm still hoping that in the middle level, somewhere in the ministries, in the presidential palace, you still have a lot of whistleblowers and people who do not want to commit suicide and would stop such an eventual process. Because maybe the plans are being drawn up. I mean, who knows? But at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, and whether we agree with it or not, even with all the armaments coming in and the amount of money that Poland wants to invest officially in its armed forces, we would still be crushed by Belarus, by Russia, mostly by Russia. But I'm guessing if there was to be an incursion, it would probably be on the Belarusian sector or an incursion into Ukraine, which would make it a hell of a lot worse for the Polish army.
Yeah, because it didn't make sense to me, Mike, at all, that all of a sudden Poland's going to commit itself to $2 billion loan from the US to purchase the weapons from the US. At the same time, we are sending Abrams tanks. The agreement here in the US was that about 31 tanks. We only sent 10, which means you think about the time period of this and the cost of it, which tells me personally there is no intention of finding a solution to the conflict soon. And by the way,
let me just say, as a this is as a non-political statement, but to all the American taxpayers out there that are watching, as a Pole, I am ashamed that my government is groveling for your money when you don't have a border with Mexico. Let me just put that out there.
Yeah,
and a lot of Polish patriots who have friends in the United States, it's a shame that we're stealing this money from you, literally. You guys should be defending your border. There is no border with Mexico. And let me be the one to say it first. I'm really sorry, and I'm ashamed for what my government is doing with your money.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Mike, because our government has no shame whatsoever. I mean, we are allowing so many. That's another. I get so angry and upset about why the government is doing things intentionally, and I'm seeing it also in Europe now with Italy, and I'm like start to think, is this some sort of a coordinated plan that's pushed for all this? But but here is the thing for the. For the tanks and so forth. And the question that I've always was wondering, okay, you got the farmers, Polish farmers that are losing their businesses, and instead of their governments, which is the same thing we do here, the government doesn't help the people who needs help. So the Polish government in this case, instead of helping the farmers who are sort of losing their businesses because of the grain from Ukraine, which, by the way, I did find out, and correct me if I'm wrong, I did find out that what's the company's name? Monsanto, whatever. They're using so many chemicals inside Ukraine, and the grain coming into Poland and Slovakia and Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken, are not a good quality anyway.
Yeah. So well, actually, Viktor Orban pointed it out that the standards to which the grain is being grown in Ukraine, he called it American standards. So you know what that means in general, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, I'm not an expert in this, but I've read some articles and I've seen some people who sit in the agricultural market in Poland who said that importing this is not only in terms of prices and destabilizing the market a bad thing, but it's literally poisoning people. Now, because a lot of that grain has already come into Poland because they had a one-year liberalization based on the decision of the European Union, I'm pretty sure I might have eaten probably some bread which contained, this import from Ukraine. So unfortunately, not only from the economic aspect, but from the health aspect, it grows into an issue of national security at the end of the day. So thankfully, we have an election coming up because I don't know how the government would have acted if we were to have an election next year and we were importing, more and more of this poison while ignoring also the plight and the anger of the Polish farmers, which, up until a few weeks ago or months ago, rather, if they were organizing protests in this regard, you'd hear some government spokesperson our equivalent of Baghdad Bob on television, state television, saying, "Oh, these farmers, they should just shut up. They're acting in the interests of Putin." And hey, wait a minute, maybe they are agents of Putin. Let's research them. I mean, this is in line with the Kremlin narrative. You know the whole story, right? If you say something against the government, it must be in line with the Kremlin narrative. So that's where we are. But thankfully, because I would say about over 55% of the support that this government gets comes from rural areas. They actually have to take into consideration the voices of the farmers. And believe me, I don't know if I can use this word on your show, but the Polish farmers are pissed. So they've taken note, and now they're promising them, manna from heaven, and obviously while blocking the grain from Ukraine. But I think a lot of them said, well, you know what? You screwed us once with liberalizing the import of Ukrainian grain into Poland, because let's not forget, the members of the European Parliament from the ruling party, Law and Justice, they all voted for liberalizing the European market to bring the grain in, first of all. So why the hell would you do that? I mean, that's where it all started, right? And people, thankfully, they have the internet. They could Google this and see who voted for what. So I don't think they're going to get that level of agricultural support as they did in the last couple of years. I think the farmers are fed up, and I think their votes in the upcoming election of October 15th are definitely going to be more dispersed. And I think a lot of them might not even go, to the polls, because they say, it doesn't make a difference anyway. They're all thieves. So.
Well, it will be a very interesting time, because here's the thing. I might be in Poland around that time. So not certain yet, but it will be interesting just to see. Yeah. Because I'm interested. I've always been interested. Even back then when I was still in the government, I used to travel a lot to Warsaw. And so I'm a little bit more familiar with the country and so on. Now, there is one piece of information came up to my attention, and I couldn't confirm it yet. Is it true that parts of the Polish border has been closed to Russians?
I haven't heard anything about that. Obviously, Poland is in line with European Union standards. So, for example, the latest information I have on this is that a car that's registered in Russia that happens to find itself in Poland can be confiscated. I haven't heard anything about the border closures for the exemptions of the Russian citizens that can come to Poland, like, for example, for a family or for some important, event. But en masse, on other issues, I haven't heard anything of a blockage or stoppage. So I'd have to look into that.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't confirm it, Mike. The people that I talk to, I know they will be well informed, not to just say something in the air like this without ensuring its accuracy. But I couldn't find. So I thought about it. I said, well, when I talk to Mike, I'm gonna just ask about this one. There is another issue I would like to get your take on it, and this one is a little bit far away from Poland, but I can see the impact of it on Poland and the rest of Europe. And this one has to do with the recent decision by the German government to allocate $7 billion or 7 billion euros, I'm sorry, to China to fix the pipelines. Is this an indication for the need, not only for Germany, given Germany is the engine of the European economy, the need for access to energy that is now really come to demonstrate how crippling the economy across the board in Europe because of lack of Russian or access to Russian energy? Yeah. What do you make of this? What do you think, Mike?
Do you mean the Chinese coming into Europe and repairing a Nord Stream?
Repairing, yes.
Okay. Well, I haven't heard of that, but it's pretty surprising. But I think it would actually be hopefully a reflection of German rationality, because the energy subsidies in Germany are coming to an end, and we don't know what type of winter awaits us this year. Last year was actually fairly mild. My wife can testify that, being half Canadian, I was really angry that there was no snow around. So I hope that changes this year. But for the Germans, I think it would be better if it was a mild winter, because those subsidies are ending and Germany is deindustrializing in large part due to the absence of cheap energy. So if they want to get the Chinese to go in and rebuild that the pipeline, I think that would be a major geopolitical shock, I think, to the United States, especially if you read Seymour Hersh's latest update on his on the anniversary of the destruction of Nord Stream 2, on his Substack from a few days ago, where he says that the reason why they blew it up in September, because originally, apparently, it was supposed to be a deterrent of blowing up or damaging Nord Stream for Putin not to go into Ukraine. So a lot of these CIA guys who, after the war was initiated, they were asking themselves, okay, well, the war started, so why do you want us to blow up the pipeline now? And it's not going to have any deterrent effect on Putin. He's already started the war. And apparently the line of thinking from the White House was that we can't risk the fact that the Germans are going to turn on the spigot once again and let the gas flow, and we're going to lose out on the European market. So the Germans cannot be tempted by the Russians to get the gas flowing again in Nord Stream. And they could have done that, obviously, when Nord Stream was up and operational still. So they had to sabotage it in order for the Germans to move to it's called freedom gas, American LNG, right?
Yeah.
Freedom gas. So it reminds me of a Freedom Fries from 2003. But right now, to tell you the truth, I haven't heard that report. I'm not discounting it. Just I haven't read anything about that. But if the Chinese were to come in and rebuild Nord Stream, I think that signifies a sort of a middle finger from Berlin to Washington, because the Chinese, I think they would actually do a pretty good job, and they do it pretty quickly, and they're known for that, of getting the pipeline going, and how that configures later into geopolitics 101 a year from now. Definitely not to the interest of Washington. So at least to the current cabal at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So it's an interesting take. I'll have a look at it, but it would certainly be something of a shocker to a lot of people in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I can confirm your statements regarding the when the CIA was pushing back. I had a talk with some of my contacts in Washington, and it was pushed back inside the agency and also in the State Department, believe it or not. Some analysts on both entities were pushing back against that plan to blow up the pipeline. And it is like it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But the pressure came from the top, and so we don't know what happened after that one. So it will be interesting with this info that I just got across last night, by the way. And yet I have to confirm it to make sure, but I can see how this will be a big blow to the United States. Because here is the thing. I believe most people, even here in the US, do not understand what is the overall objective of why we're doing what we're doing in Europe, especially with this Ukraine, is we wanted to keep the Europeans' economy down or cripple it altogether. Why? Because the energy companies here in the US are pushing very hard to ensure that there is no sort of closeness between Russia and Europe, mainly Germany in this case, when it comes down to energy. And this is why we are going now on two other fronts outside Europe, one in Venezuela, in Guyana to be exact, and the other one in Libya. So we are already getting some conversation behind closed doors, which I can only imagine what it's going to lead to. So where do you see things moving forward, Mike? Not only for Poland, but for whole Europe, now that we are entering into, it's kind of almost 2.5 years now.
Well, I think the general sense that you're getting in Europe, and from the NATO summit and the so-called peace meeting in Saudi Arabia, and from Zelensky's latest pilgrimage to the United States, the UN, and to Canada. I mean, I think it's over for Zelensky in essence. If you look at what happened in the United States, he comes in, the New York Times publishes that big article where they claim that the missile that hit Konstantinivka wasn't a Russian missile. It was a Ukrainian missile. I think 14 civilians died there. So that's a nice welcome to the party, pal, type of, declaration. At the UN, nobody practically, or nobody significant attended his speech. The Ukrainians were so desperate to portray his importance at the UN that, I don't know if you saw this, but Ukrainian TV apparently showed Zelensky speaking and listening to himself at the same time. Is there that camera angle from Biden's speech? Biden's speech, from the looks of Kuleba and Zelensky, wasn't well received at all. I mean, Zelensky was looking at Biden as if he's listening to a doubting idiot, which he was, obviously, because it was just platitudes. And let's notice that even in that speech of Biden's, there was less space committed to Ukraine than in previous speeches. I mean, this wasn't, the first Warsaw speech in March 2022. We're going to defend democracy, and this man in Putin, for God's sakes, he can't be allowed to remain in power, and so on and so on. It was much more toned down, because I think even Biden has gotten the memo that we're itching towards the end. We're not in the middle. We're itching towards the end. So that's one thing. Then what happened in Congress, right? I mean, McCarthy denied him a speaking slot to both houses. A lot of congressmen were furious. You heard J.D. Vance. You heard Josh Hawley talking about the need for, for this dumping of taxpayers' money into the Ukrainian black hole to end. Rand Paul comes out with the need for an inspector general, just as you had in Afghanistan, a fiery speech he gave on the Senate floor. And then he goes to Canada, and then you have the total, that sickening scene with the former member of the Galician SS. Now it's interesting that he himself has not responded to this, neither his office, and I don't think they're going to respond, because to them he literally is a genuine hero. But the fact that he forced his host, Trudeau, to be embarrassed by this, although as I said, I still believe that Trudeau knew what he was doing, but he did have to give that explanation, sort of, grovel himself because of the Ukrainian cause and embarrass himself. So he went back to Ukraine basically with nothing. He's going to get a couple of ATACMs, but apparently these are, very limited in numbers, and I don't think I think the ranges are different than the ATACMs that they were originally asking for. I'd have to consult my sort of military experts on this. But, they're going to get 31 Abrams tanks, whoop-de-doo, Even McMaster, I think, H.R. McMaster said a few days ago that in order to breach the defenses of the Russians, Zelensky's going to need 300 Abrams, not 31 Abrams. So, this is not going anywhere, right? So where I think this is going, I think this is literally going into a sort of geopolitical winter. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with our common friend Scott Ritter, who says the Russians are not going to allow for a frozen conflict. This is going to end on the battlefield. They've given them the chance to end on the battlefield. Russia has invented so much into this and has mobilized so much manpower. I would literally, just as an analyst of European geopolitics and a political scientist, be surprised if after building up so much hype, Vladimir Putin says, okay, we're going to create a nice DMZ here. And the most important thing is to finish is to stop the fighting. I don't think he's going to do that. He's not going to give the Ukrainians another chance to rearm, or NATO to come up with some cockamamie plan to do some sort of, possible peacekeeping intervention into Western Ukraine, or God forbid, across the Dnieper River into the east. So I think we're heading into a winter whereby Zelensky's position is going to only get weaker. I think the military is becoming more and more frustrated with the fact that they've lost 400,000 guys. For what? They're going to be very angry at his incompetence. It's going to be curious to see, for example, how the general staff of the Ukrainians acts against this. What solution are you going to do? And let's not forget that I think while she was in the States, Zelensky's wife gave an interview to 60 Minutes where she was asked, so what do you think, is your husband going to run in the next elections? And she said, well, the wife of a typical politician would say, yeah, I stand, 100% behind my husband. Me and Volodymyr, we're going to have a nice campaign. We're all in. But she said, well, if the Ukrainian people decide that he's got to go, then he's got to go. So that confidence is gone. If they have those elections, obviously, because right now that hasn't been determined yet. So Zelensky's days are definitely numbered. And you could see that all across the board, across his body language, across the fact that, these policies are failing. 31 tanks. I mean, really, they're going to get old F-16s. So what? We're entering into winter. We're entering into the muddy season. The Russians know how to fight in winter, and the Russians know how to fight in the muddy season. NATO doesn't, and as sure as hell, heavy M1A1 Abrams tanks in that mud are not going to make a hell of a difference. They might have made sense, in spring, possibly. They might have made a slight difference, but in the so-called Rasputitsa in mudland, it's just going to be, it's a duck shoot, basically.
You're right. And by the way, before I forgot, I was supposed to have Scott Ritter here with us. Just couldn't make it. Yeah, he couldn't make it today. So usually we text, and it's like, nice. I apologize for this.
I'd love to be with Scott anytime.
Yeah, I intend to do this, Mike. I intend to have. That's why I didn't say anything first because I wasn't sure if Scott could make it. But I intend to have both of you, and we can have a conversation there. So
perfect.
Now here is one last thing. I saved the best for last. One last thing. I did say your take on this. The statement by Sergei Lavrov.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard it or not. It stated that, for us to stop the war, which we could, Ukraine has to sign that it will never join NATO. Do you see any sort of reality of such things happening?
that Ukraine would relinquish its NATO aspirations.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they would, but they would only do it with a gun to their head, basically, with a Russian gun to their head. So as things stand right now, let's not forget. I mean, there's a law in Ukraine on the books whereby they prohibit negotiations with Russia, and Zelensky was the one who pushed this in the Verkhovna Rada. So it's illegal. Unless you're talking about prisoner exchanges, to conduct any official peace negotiations with the Russians. So they've given them no choice. The only reason, the only way that Kiev is going to be forced to renounce potential aspirations for NATO membership is with a Russian gun to their head. So basically, Vladimir Putin is going to make an offer they can't refuse, and that's how it's going to end. This clique that's ruling in Kiev, this corrupt pro-Banderite, rabidly Russophobic clique, I think they're suicidal. I think most of them are suicidal, and for them right now to say we're not going to enter NATO because of Russian pressure, even though they did sign up to neutrality even in March 2022 and in that peace agreement that was to be signed on 1 April in Istanbul, they've invested too much right now. So even from a PR standpoint, I don't think they would be willing to do that. And I think a lot of them also are very committed ideologically to the fact that, I mean, we're almost there. We're almost to NATO. I mean, it was Reznikov, the former Minister of Defense, who said, I think it was last year, that, as a matter of fact, we're already in NATO because we're spilling the blood for NATO, for NATO's war. And that was a couple of kernels of truth he said right there, because he actually, confirmed that this is a proxy war, which a lot of people in the West didn't want to hear, because it's a war between Russia and Ukraine, not a proxy war between Washington via Ukraine with Russia. So I think that was important. It highlighted a fact, but I think they're not long for this world. And if officially whatever is left with Ukraine were to renounce NATO membership, as I said, it's going to be with a big fat Russian gun to their head, just like Don Corleone did in The Godfather. And this time, Vladimir Putin is going to be the Godfather.
Indeed. So, Mike, where can our viewers find you?
You can find me on Twitter at MGKrupa. Some of you might have been asking what happened to Votim TV, my podcast on YouTube. It's still up there, although I am currently in the process of restructuring our production. So we're going to be moving to Rumble, where I hope to unveil a new name. Yes. I don't want to give YouTube an excuse to demonetize and destroy everything from day one, to conduct a special military operation against my channel. So we're going to be on Rumble. I'll be updating everybody on my Twitter account of where things are going. But Twitter, as of today, would be the best place to find me. Once again, at MGKrupa on X. On X is the best place where you can follow my work.
And I saw your post on X last night, as a matter of fact, believe it or not. So I'm gonna put this is for our viewers. I'm gonna put all what Mike just mentioned in the description. So you don't worry about this one. You'll find it. And the moment he established everything regarding the Rumble, because we do Rumble on Wednesday, and I will be happy to invite Mike on a Rumble as well, and we'll have an open conversation. I'll see if Scott can join us as well. But I'll put the link for you to have access to Mike platforms on the description. As soon as I'm done here, I'll organize it. So, Mike, I can't thank you enough, brother. I really appreciate you carving out time for me here. And I hope our viewers find your insights very useful and informative. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Well, thank you, Doc. It was always a pleasure, and take care.
My pleasure. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mike, because you can't find it anywhere else. And Mike, by the way, the insights, you will not hear them from anyone else, because he doesn't sugarcoat things. Say them as they are, because that's what an objective analyst does. Doesn't go after you gotta sound intelligence. It's what's objective. And this is what you will expect from us here. And we look forward to having Mike again. As always, prepare yourself for changing world order. Till next time. Bye-bye.